Welcome to another episode of Beyond Physical, where we talk about the mental, emotional, social, and at times spiritual benefits of exercise. We believe that exercise is more than movement, and this podcast is our attempt at sharing that message with the world by sharing our own as well as our guests' experiences and knowledge. If you enjoy it, we ask that you please spread the message by leaving a rating and review, or even better, by sharing with a friend. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Physical. I'm joined here by Gideon Cohen and Matt Cornish. Matt by Matt Cornish, Gideon by Gideon Cohen. And today we're going to talk about a pretty relevant topic. We're going to talk about the role of technology and activity levels, which is quite exciting. It can swing either way. I've got points for both technology for movement and technology against movement, and how those kind of things manifest. It's going to be really cool to pick your guys' brains and for you guys to maybe pick my brain back. Another bit of a mutual brain pick. So obviously there are things that encourage movement day to day that come in sort of tech forms, discovery, vitality, and those sort of gamification methods for getting people to move more, which I think super smart. And we'll obviously go down the various rabbit holes within our little 45-minute chunk. But to kind of kick things off, net, what are we saying? Is technology kind of a net positive or a net negative for movement and for people's activity levels? Gideon, I'll let you go first.
I would start off by saying that I think it's definitely a positive.
Long form answer for 12 marks.
Long form answer.
So you don't have to be concise. You can extrapolate on.
Okay, yeah. So I would say positive, but looking at the root problem that was with movement, and the continuous problem is that people are still inactive, and we need to try and get people more active. So, like, for example, like having discovery vitality as like, you know, an incentive to, you know, if you do a certain number of like workouts or activity or get your steps in or reach your goal by the end of the week so you can earn, you know, your discovery miles, is an incentive to make sure that you are moving and improving your health, which is definitely a positive, right? So someone that like an example would be someone that was at a different bank and then moved to Discovery, then opened up like a Discovery Vitality, and then wasn't you know, exercising at all, but now saw that they could get all these benefits through Vitality if they do incorporate exercise into their weekly routine, has now completely transformed that person's life and perspective on exercise. And that will, you know, hopefully perpetuate down the chain, like into their family, and then going forward, which is awesome. And I know that Discovery and Vitality have done that, not to like, you know, promote any bank or company, but that is definitely something that has happened. So from that aspect, I definitely think it's positive. I think you can agree with that.
Yes, for sure.
So yeah, that's why I think that it's majority of it is positive. Where there's a bit of negative is the competitive and unrealistic expectations when it comes to using platforms that, you know, set unrealistic goals, or it becomes a fixation, or it kind of can become like an addiction where like you need to reach these certain set out goals for you in order to, you know, save money on, you know, whatever.
Yeah, close your rings before the end of the day, and it's 12 o'clock.
So it becomes like a fixation. So you're almost forfeit doing certain activities that that you would normally do, but now are prioritizing this, and then it becomes like a negative outlook on exercise. So it can swing the other way. That's why I think it's kind of two-sided, but I do think it does lean more into the positive aspect than I think it leans into the negative aspect, if that makes sense.
For sure.
Purely looking at incentive-based like technologies for exercise, like a Vitality thing. Then you also get like you know, your built-in like apps, like, you know, the Garmin apps and the Apple Health and all that stuff, which have their own kind of like presets for, you know, to getting certain step goals or exercise or workouts in. So overall positive, but like anything, it can become you can overreach, and then it becomes like leads on towards maybe more of an addictive trait than a helpful one.
That's an interesting take. I wasn't actually expecting that slant on it.
Yeah.
I was expecting you to go more down the kind of like streaming, gaming, that kind of slant where that can kind of become all consuming. And obviously, tech has made those sorts of media ubiquitous and very easy to consume all the time, which is an easy sort of dopamine switch from like your earned dopamine of going to go and train. But I think the addictive element and the unhealthy competition element of like gamifying training is actually a very valid point. And that definitely is something that I think a lot of people struggle with, you know?
And the reason why I bring it up as well is because I've experienced quite a lot with clients and people that have worked in the health and fitness space is that it becomes less about the movement itself and just purely about making sure you're getting the average heart rate to the point where, you know, people are wearing 2 Apple Watches to get like a workout in, like things like that. Like where it becomes not so much about, okay, I'm moving my body and I'm wanting to get healthier or stronger or whatever. It's purely about I need my average heart rate to be 146 for 38 minutes, and then I can get my points, and then that's going to close my rings or whatnot.
I agree with that. Although I would make the argument that that is still better than being sedentary.
Oh,
I'd rather
100%.
someone was addicted to their vitality ring closing than was sitting on the couch doing nothing. They're not. It doesn't work in absolutes like that.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, if we have the one scenario of somebody has an unhealthy obsession with their vitality points on Discovery versus somebody has kind of, I don't know, an unhealthy obsession with getting to the next level in Minecraft, I think that the health benefit of the former is more than the latter.
I think I was also just using the narrative of like activity only like technologies, and not speaking so much about like activities that don't include exercise, like or like technologies that don't require exercise. So like your gaming and your streaming and stuff. Looking at purely the kind of like the technologies that only involve exercise and how they can sway.
Yes.
Like from being extremely useful and helpful to sometimes being like a bit negative and towards like unhealthy.
Yes.
And then overall, the reason why I mentioned the 2 Apple Watches to track the workouts is that because that then perpetuates and then it becomes a negative, or like a exercise becomes like something part of your job.
Yes.
And not something that can be recreational or help you, maybe unwind or, mentally switch off from, your day to day.
For
it's
sure.
Like I have to go to the gym so I can do set amount of minutes at set amount of heart rate so I can get my points, and then I can go home. Which, yes, it's fine. It's better than being sedentary, but
it's still not an optimal
it unfortunately creates an unhealthy
relationship with exercise.
And that's what people don't talk about, is that the unhealthy relationship with it.
Yes, the dark side of these kind of gamification apps around movement. Matt, what's your stance on that? What are you thinking around?
Well, I think like
the
to
involvement
touch
of
on to
tech
the
in-
point that you're saying now, it might be better for someone to be like chasing that, like closing the activity rings to get the discovery points versus someone that's not doing that kind of activity using technology. I think both, like at a certain point, will equally be bad. Reason being is you'll get people that will kind of, like Gideon said, focus on the end goal without actually focusing on the details that they need to, which is so essential in a fitness journey. So like focusing on like your self-awareness, your assessment, your fitness level, your comfort in certain movements, and your ability to do certain movements without feeling any discomfort. Sorry.
I'm gonna jump in there as well. So where my mind is at with those apps, and this is kind of an idea I've been bouncing off a mate of mine for, a few weeks actually, and I see a huge gap and a shortfall in these gamification things at the moment because there is a huge focus on cardiovascular training. And getting your average heart rate up, which is valid. However, there isn't that whole system is optimized towards getting your heart rate up. There isn't something that rewards to the same kind of level strength training. So the focus is obviously on, what is it? It's 70% of your
It's kind of like what I was saying about like the metrics with regards to heart rate in order to, get points or whatever. There's
Yes.
no reward for um, like improving on your 1 rep max on a squat.
No.
Like you can't track that and then input it into an app and then you can be rewarded the same way you can for staying at 75% of your heart rate for 45 minutes.
Yes, and I think that the issue is there's obviously drawback to an excess of any sort of training, anything, but what you end up having with an excess of cardiovascular is obviously that is highly kind of energy intensive, and you can get a lot of people moving into the space where they aren't actually doing enough strengthening work, and they move into a place where muscle atrophy and they are becoming weaker, and they're focused on one dimension of fitness, and that can present a whole bunch of different challenges. And obviously research and popular academics kind of highlights at the moment the importance of hypertrophy and building muscle and building strength for longevity and health and for metabolic health. And that isn't something that these gamification apps and platforms and technologies really pay much attention to, because why would you go and lift weights for 45 minutes if you're only going to get, I don't know, 50 points on vitality if you can run for 45 minutes and get 150 points?
Yes.
And and then we've spoken about it on the podcast so many times, that the fact that strength training has to be included and go hand in hand with any form of other like kind of activity, if it's sport related or if you just like a recreational runner. You need to, in order to continue running or doing a sport or doing whatever form of activity, there needs to be some form of resistance training built in as like a non-negotiable. And we've spoken about that so many times. And the fact that, getting onto your point again, is the fact that though that style of training, strength training, and whatever hypertrophy training isn't rewarded the same way as like cardiovascular activity, is going to create a bit of quite a lot of issues, I think, down the line, with people only focusing on that cardiovascular element with leaving the strength training in the background.
Yes. I think, to be honest, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I haven't directly chatted to anyone who works at the kind of tech side of discovery or vitality or anything.
No.
But I'd imagine that the whole program is centered around, okay, what are the risk factors that usually cause the highest number or frequency of payouts? Okay, it has to do with cardiovascular disease, it has to do with whatever else can be. Oh, maybe let's say, and I mean, cardiovascular disease can also be brought about by obesity and things like that. But let's say that they've identified these sort of payout scenarios, and the easiest kind of lever to pull to help mitigate those scenarios is by doing cardiovascular training. Therefore, they have incentivized cardiovascular training the most. And because what they've done is really smart, because they basically incentivize us to move so that we become less of a risk to them, so their chance of paying us out for a claim is lower. So it's a super smart thing, but it's obviously focused primarily on cardio because it's low hanging fruit, and it has a great return on their sort of like incentives investment. But I think as more research comes out around the benefits of strength training, and they might be having more claims around sarcopenia, osteoporosis, and things like that are obviously muscle
brain disease.
kind of, yes, that are all tied to muscle building or the loss of muscle mass, they might start to actually incentivize strength training, because I think we are still kind of at a point where it's not part of the common discourse to be like, oh, I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z, go lift weights. It's that's still very much kind of in the periphery.
And it's difficult to track that.
It is
far easier to track, your heart rate and your heart rate zones on your watch, and then link it to an app, and then kind of extrapolate it like that. Far more challenging to like monitor and track progress in strength and hypertrophy. Obviously, it's not impossible, but it's just for them on a large scale, those kind of metrics with heart rate is far easier. Even though you can like sync your watch and record a strength workout, it's still only taking into account your heart rates.
You know what they could actually do, which is quite interesting, is what they could do is go to Garmin or go to Fitbit or go to Whoop or something, and because obviously when we start a workout here, it'll say, okay, you go down, you click strength, and they can ask Garmin, what's the one you have? Sunto, Fitbit, whatever. They can ask for all the data around heart rate metrics pertaining specifically to strength training, and they can establish a mean or a median sort of I think it would be a median range of heart rate for that specific activity, and then they can determine that and be like, this is generally characteristic of a strength training activity, and maybe set that as like some sort of a tracking measure. Because I'm trying to think how
Like
you would.
a small side note, it's like a little bit off track, but like the fact that when people do their strength training, but they are tracking their workouts and they still, want to get their points or whatnot, they'll actually end up doing their strength training incorrectly and make it more like a muscle
Intense.
endurance or
Yeah.
cardiovascular endurance with weights.
High intensity.
So they will, like, for example, if they, their first movement is to squat, they'll reduce the weight significantly so they can do 5 sets and only rest 20 seconds in between each set. And that's not going to really do anything.
Won't reap the benefits
You
that you
see,
actually
so,
want.
so that, in that sense, they also have to try and mitigate that mentality of like, if I'm going to do strength now, but I still want to get my 300 points, let's fucking nail the heart rate.
Yes.
And that mentality is still very much prevalent. I see that all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to rest because I want my heart rate to be 160 as an average. So
I think to add like onto the point that I wanted to say earlier before I got interrupted, but sorry, but it's basically that technology is good as a tool, but the way that it's being utilized in society is not ideal. I mean, we spoke about it in the David protein bar episode. I'd now check it out, but the way, and also in the other one where they were looking at the industry, and even though the industry in fitness and wellness is growing, the industry, the statistic around people and their movement and their activation, it's not increasing, it's actually decreasing. And that's all because, like what you just said now, from a company point of view, when you're trying to reduce the payouts, the amount of risk that the payouts are, and you're trying to incentivize people to do certain movements, the focus is not that you want people to move more. The focus is that you want to take an aspect, give it to people, and help them kind of like focus on that aspect so they can protect you. So then the main aim is not actually promoting health and wellness. It's actually just kind of like finding a way to kind of make business more efficient, or make things better within the business,
But those things don't have to be mutually exclusive.
At the same time, you say that, but then you look at like what you said now as well, where they see other trends coming in where payouts are actually being caused by multiple other things, and now they have to change it. Whereas it could have been done in the first place by using their platform and using their reach to just promote people moving more without just focusing on one aspect for incentive. Because now, when we have to take on clients, or when we have to welcome people into the space and they have this kind of energy or this focus towards completing their rings or like doing things a certain way, we have to like reverse that, take them back to base level, and then work their way up into like a more generalized fitness journey that's gonna help them kind of get what they want out of it. So it's like we have something working forward, but then also pushing the people backwards. Then we have to take them from back and then push them forward again. But then the cycle just continues.
So I hate to use Discovery as a constant example, but it's like it's really relevant for the conversation. But do you agree that Discovery do make the incentives for people to live and lead a healthier lifestyle through multiple facets? Like,
I totally agree with that.
The reason why they give you discounts on shopping at, like, Woolworths or Checkers or whatever, and like incentivizing like clicks and Discam and getting discounts there, and for example, like at Woolworths, they, on the labels of each product, it's like which product is like you get the most benefits through vitality, and it's like normally the products that are like the quote unquote the healthiest. So I feel like they do take their customers' health extremely like they prioritize it extremely well. I don't know.
The thing is, because there's also from both sides. I mean, for them, for a health insurance company, it is within their best interest that their client base is as healthy as possible.
Completely.
Because I mean, and I think health insurance is one of the most backwards business models that exist, because they, as a company, are incentivized to do the opposite of what we need as a customer. They're incentivized to not pay out,
Yeah.
because that's a massive cash outflow for them. Like, their kind of ideal scenario is collect monthly payments, and never pay out. That's why you get so much pushback when you want a payout or a claim or whatever it may be, and there's so many loopholes and all these kinds of things. But what they have done, which is kind of flipped it a little bit and made it mutually beneficial, is let's try and help our customers be as healthy as possible so that we reduce the risk of having to make a payout. They get healthier, we have to pay out less. That's the
Yeah.
kind of hypothesis around that. And
Yeah.
and I mean, obviously there'll be incidents where you get hit by a car or something. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter how healthy you are cardiovascularly, you're still gonna, break all your ribs. But
Yeah.
they, in non kind of accident terms, the risk factor drops significantly.
Of course, and I think to add more onto that, I think that they are doing a good job, and I think that they are doing something that a lot of businesses can look at and utilize as an example, as a model, to kind of interact with their customer base and their clients, right? And then if you look at other aspects of technology, whether it's like ChatGPT, for example, and it's all within the fitness industry and it's all within people trying to get into fitness, I think that, like I said again, technology is a very useful tool, but the way that it's being used and the way that people kind of utilize it or are guided towards utilizing it is not really ideal, because people think that they can just go on ChatGPT and then find anything that works. Whereas, like, coming to a fitness professional, getting proper knowledge or proper guidance, and then utilizing the technology on top of that would put you in a way more ideal place and a better place to not get injured, to get a good program, and to work well within your program. So I think it's just like technology isn't the problem. It's just like, how do we make sure that we're guiding people while using technology to make their lives better? Because if I'm trying to think of this, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, but anything that we get as like like an external item only heightens what we already can do it, like, without it.
It
So, like,
augments that capability.
exactly. So if you are really good at doing something and you add technology into that mix, you'll be exceptionally good at it, because now you'll have a tool that will make that even better. But if you weren't good at it in first, like, you need to develop that skill and you develop that foundation and then add technology in. So I think that's just the missing link for a lot of individuals. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No, I think that's a great point, and I kind of like wanted to segue and ask you both, like, what is your thoughts on, like, technology and its where it can aid, like, in actual, like, for example, like, machinery that uses technology, like, for strength training, for example, like machines that, like, use, like, set RPEs in terms
Yes.
of your, like super advanced, like, where, if you're doing, like, a chest press, but you can set it to an RP and it actually will select the weight for you, and, like, it kind of, like, augments the whole movement. What do you guys think about that, opposed to, like, a regular bench press? And, like, that goes for, like, squatting as well, and there's, like, these, like, squatting machines that you actually get in, and then, like, you set it all up, like, using, like, a mini iPad on the side, and then it can kind of guide you through the movement, and there's like a whole process behind that. So that's like a
Yeah.
physical technology in our space.
We
I don't
we
know.
actually saw that. I think we were talking about that gym. I think it's a gym called Zero. I don't know what the name of it
Yes,
is, but they have some equipment that has like a bit of a digital touch to it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think from like using my sports background as well, I think it's so helpful to have some equipment for that. I think there's a time and place for everything. There's a time and place for like your base level bench press or your base level like squat rack, but we can have like some bit of technology to kind of put for your like intermediate or like advanced lifters, where they can put their data in, like put their goals, and then have something potentially like taking them through their range, kind of analyzing points where they are not kind of pushing them, like pushing as well or kind of performing as well, and then kind of giving that to the person afterwards. I think that would be massive.
I agree in that. I think it's a very helpful tool for lifters who are fairly comfortable already in the training environment. However, I feel like for novice lifters and beginners, it is I don't see as much of an upside just because it feels like it would add another layer to the intimidation factor of training, where it's like, oh my gosh, it's technological and stuff. It's like I need to understand that, and I need to understand just the movement itself. But I think I can remember when we did testing batteries back when I played rugby, we did this thing where there were these little motor type things. I don't know if they were motors, but they had like these almost zip line thingies. Attached them to the barbell, and you did like jump squats, and it would calculate like your power output and things like that.
Cool.
So I think that for kind of
That's
a
like
highly
testing
trained
equipment.
individual and a very kind of specialized or qualified coach, that's amazing. Like, that's awesome. I mean, for the athlete, it's like, this is the real deal. And for the coach, it's like, oh, look at all this amazing data.
No room for error.
I can figure all this stuff out. It's all this data right in front of me. But for the novice lifter, I don't see a huge application in that. I think, maybe I could be wrong. I'm just sort of
Actually,
spitballing, but I think that.
yeah. To add on to that, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it would add a lot to someone that has a lot of like comorbidities, for example, like either like they struggle with certain movement patterns, like putting them within a certain rack, for example, and putting all their data in and asking the machine to kind of like track certain movement patterns and seeing where their power output is maximal versus sub-maximal, or like, yeah, good or not as good. And from there, taking the data and analyzing it, and then looking at the phase of their movement, and then taking that and then working in that phase, and then going back and retesting it. I think it would be massive.
I think it would help that person get the best possible experience,
Yeah.
but that would be something that is a tool that, again, sort of augments and supports a highly trained professional in what they do for that person. Because I don't know why, but I mean, I might be thinking about it in the wrong way, or in maybe a different way, but I feel like those kinds of tools, it's going to take you through the movement pattern and show you the stuff, but I think that you need to have a theoretical grounding and basis to work off of to actually get the full benefit out of it, at least how they currently exist. If it was some amazing technology where there's like literally like a square or like a rectangle, and you walk into that rectangle and then it like puts the bar on you and like moves you into the position, and then then you're okay, then it like literally does what a coach would do and helps you do the thing. That'd be amazing. But I'm imagining like a Grucox or a something like that, like a highly technical machine that you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, that looks like a transformer, but then your kind of bio or your coach or whatever puts you in it and helps you, and then it's like you're getting far better care than if you were, or service, than if you were just doing some, I don't know, eccentrically loaded
And to make my point, I'm saying like
extension.
the individual utilizing the machine with the coach.
Yes.
Not alone.
The reason why I asked the question is because it was more like targeted at is what we were talking about with like maybe general population, like with regards to like applications, that kind of technologies. I'm talking like technologies that could replace like basic movements that we need to learn in strength training that carries over into like everyday life, like a lunge, a hinge, a squat, like replacing that by being put on a machine and taken through the correct range of motion with maximal muscle tension and all muscle recruitment in that certain movement, so there's no room for error. I feel like that can't. I don't feel like it ever can shadow the fact that we all need to start on the level where we can do basic movements that correlate into like day-to-day movements. I don't think that can ever be replaced in terms of like technology and its like implication in gym spaces, like machinery that purely uses technology in order to work. So like to replace a free barbell or a dumbbell or a kettlebell, I think that always needs to come first, and everything else is kind of just like fancy additions.
Yes.
That's why I kind of like wanted to ask, because this is now becoming a very common thing where you can like have a cable machine that can like set up to a perfect angle and you can do like kind of everything on it. But maybe the fact that it's too perfect isn't good because life isn't perfect and the way you move isn't perfect.
Yeah.
So that's why it was like a bit of like a devil's advocate kind of question.
Yeah.
But like it's important to like unpack that, I think, as
Yeah.
if we're talking about technology.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of benefit as well in things like continuous glucose monitors, which I think we briefly touched on in the David episode, I think. But that kind of technology where you're empowering lay people and day-to-day like non-medical professionals to actually have access to really powerful data sets around what their body is doing, and maybe they don't understand that off the bat, but they can then go to a doctor or something and they've got all this data and they can talk through that and understand that. I think that kind of technology is really beneficial, and I think that paired with the advent of these game-like apps, sort of like Strava, where you are continuously just playing a game with your fitness, like trying to build a streak, or you're interacting and posting your whatever's like in the ideal scenario when it's not an unhealthy obsession, but it's more of a social space where you get to kind of watch the progress of your training. That then makes that usually, I think, for a lot of people, piques curiosity and goes, it kind of creates this thought process of, okay, like I can see that supposedly according to Strava's metrics, my fitness is improving, and I can see my mate is doing this and my other friend is doing this. And I now start to develop some sort of interest in, why is my average heart rate is becoming lower, as I've become fitter. And then you start to learn these sort of things. Because, I mean, for us, that's sort of like general, like we kind of like just being in the space, we sort of understand that and it's accepted as sort of common knowledge. But for somebody who's just training for the sake of training because they enjoy it and they notice these trends, they're like, oh, that's interesting, let me like maybe research a bit into that, and they go down a bit of a rabbit hole, and then they learn about certain things to track data and whoop straps and continuous glucose monitors and all these kinds of things, and heart rate variability. And then that is, there are a whole bunch of different sorts of data that people can look at where they can now actually understand the story of how their body is performing and functioning, which I think is hugely valuable, because now you take every experience you have around health and you make it more relevant, where you could actually go to a doctor and be like, what, I'm not a medical professional, but typically this is what data looks like. This is how I've been feeling. This is how the data is looking like now. Please help me. And that is immediately now that doctor's life is 10 times easier.
Yeah.
And they can give you better service, and they can help you they can make recommendations around things a lot better. I mean, we've also seen the advent of people really looking at their bloods and their blood tests and certain hormone levels and things like that. There are a lot of guys kind of like Stan Efferding and what's that other dude's name, more plates more dates, Derek. And there are a couple of other dudes as well. Funnily enough, they're probably all on gear, but they kind of advocate for a very valid point, which is that you should take your bloods as early on in your life as possible, as soon as you can afford it, because you want to create a sort of consistent cadence of testing that, because you'll get to a certain age where that usual range starts to change and is different for you. And obviously, typically we work with average, like what is like the norm for males between 25 and 35. You could having tested your own bloods for the decade between now and when you're 35, gotten a range that's different, but you're still healthy. Like you're still, whereas now, okay, you're going to go for a test when you're 55 and like, oh my gosh, your LDL levels are completely, where it's like, okay, maybe that's not within normal range, but they've always been like that for me. And
they're only slightly elevated.
And then slightly elevated, and then they'll treat that score differently. They won't over or under medicate you, which can have severely adverse effects. So, because obviously all these things are based off of norms and averages, and which are helpful for us making inferences about people's health at a glance. But I think if you want to get a really detailed look at it, and maybe this is like way too in depth, but I think that if you can, you probably should try. And I mean, personally, I don't do it. It is quite expensive.
If only it was more accessible.
Yes, if it was more accessible. Like in an ideal world, I'd go probably
Oh, then
once a year.
if it was
Yeah.
more
I
accessible,
think
full
everyone
blood
would be
panel.
doing
that
it.
would be the gold standard. Imagine if it was like if like Discovery offered like once every 2 months that you could go for free.
That'd be amazing.
Like
Yeah.
that would be like next level, because that's like the perfect way to keep track of everything.
To be honest, if it cost me $500, like if Discovery swapped out the performance test thing for a blood panel and it cost the exact same, which it doesn't. I think a comprehensive blood panel is
It's very
like
expensive.
4,000 or 5,000 rand
Yeah.
or something. If it cost a tenth of that, like $500, I would do it every year. I would do that because it's like, and then you can monitor that, and it's actually that I feel. I don't know if that would be more beneficial to them, but I certainly think that it'd be really cool. And talk about technology. I mean, getting the actual data of what's going on inside, because like we've spoken about subjective feedback, and that is really important. But then when you want to go into the nitty gritty, the objective, actual hard data, you can't ignore that. Like that's very important. It's a very important feedback. I mean, I've got a client at the moment who feels amazing, but they've noticed a sort of like, I don't know if it's exactly arrhythmia, but an irregularity in their heartbeat. And they said, yeah, the usual symptoms are lightheadedness and feeling faint and blah and blah. And he's kind of like, I don't feel that at all. But now they're obviously doing all of these kind of tests and looking into it where they wouldn't have picked up on that potentially serious problem if they hadn't been looking at the data once a year. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's
Like
different.
consistently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing. Who was it who said, flip, man, I'm going on a rant here, but somebody said the other day, some big voice was like, cardiovascular disease doesn't,
Oh,
it
it's a
doesn't
silent
happen
killer.
like,
That's
you only notice it when it's about to
it's a
fucking,
silent killer.
you know?
That's kind of the consensus kind of forever, is that like it's the one thing that you can be completely fine the one day and then next day you have a heart attack.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like and that's I mean, we've all
unbelievable.
known someone or something that's I've definitely have known, and it kind of creeps around the corner, and like they're completely fine, they're running the one day, they're like a fucking triathlete, and then like a week later they have a heart attack and they're
Yes.
38,
Yeah.
42.
Yeah, young people. People have literally like early 30s. It's intense. And it often happens with high-level athletes as well, well, not often, but you'll see pretty regularly someone, who was it the other year? Christian Eriksen,
Christian
dropped
Eriksen
in the middle of the
collapsed
field.
on the soccer field.
I'm pretty sure that was a cardiovascular
That was
something. And that's fascinating to me because they get medicals, I think, every year.
a lot of Premier League. I think another player from was it Brentford also had it. Tom Locker or something. But
Remember
same
that game when they
same
all
thing.
surrounded him? Yeah, I think I
Yeah,
remember
same
that.
thing. Like collapse on the field, high performance athlete. But I think it's also I think it's also this outlook that like if someone is training at a high level or someone is at a high level of fitness,
They're healthy.
doesn't
They're healthy.
mean that that you are not susceptible to these things. Like you still have to understand that your body needs to be regulated whether you're not doing training or whether you're doing too much training. So like these players could be on the end where they're doing like unreal amounts of just going at it, training at high intensity, then playing and then going into international tournaments, not getting rest, traveling internationally, coming back, going to the next game. Like they also need to regulate that. And like if you miss one thing in a high or rapid pace schedule, then that happens.
Also being pre-exposed, like being
Yeah.
hereditary and like kind of like not picking up on that.
It's just in your deck of cards. It's
Yeah.
coming at some stage,
Yeah, you just
no matter how healthy you are.
and you just kind of never went for bloods or never had that checked, and then it's like, oh, okay, flip, it actually runs in my family, or it is something that is common.
Yeah.
And then you are this like super healthy person, but like next minute.
That's another way, sorry to cut you off, that technology can help. If you guys are familiar with things like 23andMe, they do these disease
Yes.
screenings where you do a saliva swab, you send it off to a lab, they send back your ancestry and all this cool stuff. I think you can go ancestry package or a predisposition package or bundle package. And
Love it.
23andMe, link in bio below. No, I've never paid for that. That's also like 3-something grand.
Use
or
it
something.
Horizon 15%.
Horizon 15 for 0% off 23andMe. But no, that's also a cool way that you can uncover these sort of genetic predispositions, and then sort of at least adapt your lifestyle to mitigate as best as possible something like that happening. And it doesn't mean you have to be kind of, pedantic about everything. It's just you're aware, you have an awareness. The first level, kind of the first step to change behavior or any sort of prevention is just awareness, just knowing that that thing is there.
Yeah, I think like the more we speak about it, the more I don't like to be this person, because like you get a lot of people that will always ask why, but it's just it does feel at some moments when we're talking about health and like stuff that we have to kind of line up. Why do we have to put so many things in place just to get something that's so important and so essential for us? You know what I mean? Like,
It's a good
the
question.
level of accessibility to everyone is not the same, and the amount of things that you have to do just to get one aspect of your health like open, and then be like, okay, cool, I'm fine for that for the next 5 years. Then you have to work for another 2 years and then kind of like set up another aspect, and it's almost like you have to do that through the different aspects of your health to kind of set up yourself as an individual, and then also for your family. But then for the next generation, they also need to do that manually. So yes, we have advancements in technology, but manually we still are working at a high level to get access to these advancements. And I think that's crazy.
I think there's also a challenge in trying to balance the positive elements of the technological advancements that we've made with the very, very kind of dangerous elements. So
Yeah.
a huge element of technology we've completely overlooked in this whole discussion, actually, now I'm like, what the hell, is food. Like the technology involved in
yes,
food.
I think we need to
is
have a
one,
separate
that's a
thing
whole
for that.
episode
And
in and
I've
of
got
itself.
a lot to say about that.
And I mean, that's the biggest, that's probably the biggest
Yeah.
threat to our health is the food industry and
Aye.
how we harvest and make food and, what is in the food. Like,
This is where I'm going to come
GMO.
from America. You
This
know,
is-
when I said I was going to come from America, this is where I'm
This
going
is
to
a
come
to be
from.
continued.
Yeah.
I want to chat about food, like the technology that exists within the food space, and then also that thing you brought up about athletes, professional athletes, and health. That is such a cool
Great.
conversation
Great
because
topic, that, yeah.
and actually this past Friday it was mine and Jason and Kirsten and Claire's every first Friday pasta night where we make pasta. Let's go.
First
And
Friday.
Kirsten asked something about what do you think of how many actual pro athletes are healthy, and that gets me going because I'm like, to be honest, maybe 1% of them are actually healthy. Because if you've ever taken yourself to a place where you're trying to maximize your body's performance output, you feel terrible.
Yeah.
You don't feel good. 70% of the year you feel shit. In season you probably feel quite good, but the rest of the year you really like wringing the towel dry.
Yeah.
You're like either trying to, if you're a fighter,
Especially if you're natural.
And you feel like you have
Yeah,
nothing to
absolutely.
give. That's the thing. Like you're ringing yourself, but you feel like you have nothing to give. Or
And
you're
even-
getting symptoms that you feel like you should stop.
yes, exactly. And even if you're at a point where you're performing better
The
than,
alarm balls are going off.
all going
Don't
off.
do another set.
and they're like, no,
Stop.
keep going,
And
keep
you have
going.
to do
Keep
5
going,
more
yeah.
sets.
Exactly, because
No.
that's the whole thing of competition is even if
Yeah.
you're performing, in a high performance space, it's like even if you're performing well compared to everyone else, you still don't know how much more you have left in your thing. So you're going to push it more and take it further.
Yeah.
But I think is your session now.
Yeah.
I think we can wrap it up with, I think there's so many positives, and I think used correctly, technology is definitely a net positive, but we still have a long way to go in terms of understanding how to use these things correctly. And obviously, there's a lot of technology in food and things like that make it
I'm excited for
maybe
that
not so good.
podcast.
But stay tuned for that one.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Keep on.
Gideon, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
thank-
Seb.
thank you.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you, guys.
And we will catch you in the next episode.
Sweet.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to the show, guys. We love answering specific questions. So if there's anything you want to know, leave a comment or reach out to us directly at HorizonZA on Instagram or email us at movement@horizongym.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Seb Prentice, and this is Beyond Physical.